Okay, so I'm on page 17 of The Tempest in the middle of the second column. I'm looking at a speech by Prospero, and it's one of the most famous speeches in all of Shakespeare, and it is really legitimately one of my favorite speeches in all of Shakespeare. Um, so he ends the play, and he just like Shakespeare, he says these are actors, and now they're all. I had to stop. He forgot about the real world because he got distracted by the magic show he was doing with characters and actors and these kinds of things. Um, and just like Shakespeare has characters and actors, and then he says they're just actors and they're all melted, and then he says something bigger. So that's already a pretty solid connection to Shakespeare, but here he says something much bigger. He says and like the base, he's going to do a metaphor now. And like the baseless fabric of this vision, it's a vision because it's a sort of the vision being the magical show that he just showed Ferdinand and Miranda. It's baseless. It doesn't have a base. It doesn't have a bottom. It's not real. It's an illusion. Just like a play is baseless. It's not real characters. They're all made up. It's baseless. He says, just like the baseless fabric of this vision, meaning just like this fictional play that I put on for you. Then he starts listing the cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the great globe itself, yea, all which it inherit, shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, the pageant is the play that he was just showing the kids, the illusion, leave not a rack behind. So he says that he says something much bigger about life here. It's a kind of neat thing that he says. He says that he has to stop the show, and everything just dissolves and goes away. Just like at the end of the play, Othello and Desdemona are gone. The actors that played them are walking around, but the characters of Desdemona, Othello, Iago, poof, they're just, where did they go? They went nowhere. They don't exist anymore. They dissolved. He says just like that, and he lists off all these things in the real world. Cloud-capped towers, those are towers that are so big they reach to the like, think skyscrapers. Gorgeous palaces that kings build for themselves in the real world, solemn temples like that big church on Fifth Avenue, St. Patrick's. The great globe itself, meaning the whole world, the globe, the whole world, everything will dissolve. It's a big moment in the play. It's a big moment in Shakespeare studies because he says, listen, this play that I made for you guys, where I had these characters show up and pretend to be real, they're not real. And I've ended the play, and they've all dissolved and gone away. Just like when Othello ends, Desdemona and Othello and Iago, they just disintegrate. Their actors are still alive, but the characters are gone. He says, you know what? Life is like that. He says people build big things. He says they build cloud-capped towers, they build palaces, they build temples. He says, but all of that is just like a play. It's a metaphor. He's comparing the world to a play. What do they have in common? Well, when a play is over, everything in it just disappears, right? Where Desdemona just disappears because she's not a real person, she's fictional, and if there's not an actress playing her, she's gone. And he says the whole world is like that. He says all these things that people build, they're going to dissolve too. People build a big tower to the sky, they think it'll be there forever, the skyscrapers, but they won't. They'll disintegrate eventually. The churches that people build and they think will be there for 1,000 years, maybe they will be there for 1,000 years, but eventually they will disintegrate too. He says, and like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. That all of these things are going to dissolve and they're not going to leave anything behind. Just like when a play is over, all those fictional characters just disappear. He says the world is like that, and that all the things people build in the world, it's not real either, and they're going to disappear. It's a metaphor. He's comparing the stuff in the world is just like a play. What do they have in common? The play, when it's over, everything just disappears. And life also. Everything just disappears and disintegrates eventually. Nothing lasts forever in a play. It's just 2 hours. Nothing lasts forever in the real world either, says Prospero. And he thinks things are going to disappear. And then he has an even bigger, this is a metaphor, right? He has another part of this metaphor. It's a complicated metaphor. He continues on and he says, we are such stuff as dreams are made on. He feels like people are just like dreams, which is an interesting thing to say. Again, because when a dream it feels real while you're there, and then when you wake up, it kind of disintegrates and just goes away, and you forget about it. And he says people are like that too. We're like dreams, that we seem real, but are we really? It's a triple metaphor. and it's actually Shakespeare's most important and most interesting metaphor. And I will tell you something crazy. I have actually dedicated a huge amount of my life to thinking about this particular metaphor. If you take film class with me next semester, a lot of film class will be spent on this same metaphor. Here's the metaphor. Normally, a metaphor compares two things. This compared to that. What do they have? Prospero and Shakespeare. What do they have in common? They both create illusions for people to entertain them. And they have other things in common too. But the triple metaphor, three things compared, it's something that pops up in Shakespeare a lot. I'm a person who reads a lot of Shakespeare plays, so you see these metaphors pop up again and again and again and again. And the metaphor is this: dreams, plays like the theater, and the real world. Shakespeare thinks dreaming, he thinks living, dreaming, and performing are all the same thing. What do they have in common? They're not quite real. They're very important. Life and plays and dreams are very important while you're there, but life and plays and dreams all eventually kind of dissolve away to nothing. They both involve kind of performing roles. Things are not quite real. Things combine and recombine in strange ways. They seem very important, but ultimately they just kind of disintegrate. It's kind of a major, it's one of Shakespeare's, I think it's actually Shakespeare's biggest and most important metaphor. And since Shakespeare is the most important writer that we have, I think it's just the most important thing about Shakespeare is actually that huge metaphor. I'm interested in a filmmaker whose name is David Lynch, and if you take the film class with me, we will spend the entire film class talking about David Lynch. David Lynch also, he sees a lot of similarities between living, dreaming, and performing. And Shakespeare, in this passage in particular, sees big links between living and dreaming and performing. He sees them being fundamentally the same kind of thing. Okay. All right, good. So we're kind of going to continue on with this. I'm going to go get us another thing to look at. So Prospero's upset with himself because he got lost in just like 12 years ago, he got lost in his magic books and forgot about governing the state, at which point his evil brother took over and he got kicked out with his daughter to an island. Once again, in the middle of doing a magic show for Ferdinand and Miranda, he forgot Caliban was going to kill him. And so he's angry at himself for sort of screwing that up. So let's take a look at this. All right, let's take a look at this next thing here. So I'm on page 19. This is a big speech that Prospero has in this play, and it's an interesting one. Actually, hold on a second. I think I might have grabbed it a little bit too early. Did I? Oh yeah, I think I need the whole scene. Oh, sorry, I've got the camera pointed the wrong way. So what I want to look at now, let's fix that. What I want to look at now is Act 5. This is the last sort of scene of the play, and I want to kind of look at the ending. I think it's a really interesting. Prospero has an interesting conversation with Ariel here, and I think it's something that is interesting when you think about Prospero as being sort of like Shakespeare. It's a really interesting thing. Remember, Prospero, his enemies, his brother that betrayed him, the king that kind of helped betray him. These guys he's crash landed his enemies on the island. We don't know exactly what he wants to do with them, but we know that he wants some kind of revenge at the beginning of the play. And you may be reminded of Iago. Revenge was one of those things that made Iago destroy Othello. And so you see that Prospero is a little similar to Iago in that he wants to get revenge on his enemies. But he's very different from Iago. One of the most interesting things about Prospero is he ultimately chooses not to get revenge on them. It's one of the things that makes this an interesting play. I think I'm going to stop this here so I can kind of pick this up in the next video. But okay.